Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dudes and dudettes, the sexy and the not so sexy, big children and little. I am the novelist, author, poet, Lamont Anthony Wright, aka Graffiti Bleu. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to stop in to the Adventures of a Naive Poet podcast. Storytelling time.
Junkie on the track.
This particular story, I have told, but not necessarily in a podcast form. You know, people that know me know this story. People that know the gentleman I'm getting ready to speak on know the story. But actually, this story was inspired by my man Vaughn when he asked me a question. And he was just like, do you remember when you and Hood used to freestyle on the phone all the freaking time? So of course, this is the Hoodsterowski story, or let's just call it the Kid Hood story. Once upon a time, I lived in Queens, New York. I was born. There's 5 boroughs. I was born in the borough of the Bronx, coincidentally, where hip hop, the birthplace of hip hop. Coincidence? Probably not. And the early part of my youth, my family and I lived in Manhattan, Lower East Side, East 8th Street and Avenue D. This was good for a time. I had a very charmed freaking life. But then life would change because in 1977, here comes my brother wanting to be born. Well, this Manhattan apartment is not big enough for all of us, so off we go to Queens. We moved to, first we moved to Far Rockaway, Queens, which is notorious in its own right for many things. And shortly after living in the Auburn projects in Far Rockaway, my parents leveled up and we got ourselves a house in Hollis, Queens, 199th Street, and between Jamaica Avenue and Hillside Avenue, in specific, on 199th Street and about 89th Ave. This is called Jamaica, Queens. Hollis Boulevard is maybe a half a dozen blocks that way. Some people wanted to call that part of Jamaica, Queens, Hollis, Queens, because Run DMC made Hollis, Queens famous at this point, mid-80s, whatever, 1980, I think Sucker MCs dropped in 83? That is a guess. So, of course, because Run DMC were absolutely the biggest hood rock stars Queens had ever seen to that point. Of course, if you lived in Jamaica, Queens, with Hollis, Queens 6 blocks down the way, everybody in my hood just said we lived in Hollis, Queens, even though we really didn't live in Hollis, Queens. Anyway, on my block, you had a lot of talented fellas, guys who break dance, guys who did graffiti art. My man Vincent Osario comes to mind. My main man Hayes, which I rapped about in the A Moment of Clarity project. He's up the block, very, very skilled rapper. My man Conrad Qualis, he was down the block. He could kick a freestyle too. Michael Grubb, Stephen Grubb across the street from me. They could pop, lock, and they had a couple of rhymes freaking too. I took rap fairly serious early on, among other things, just my young creative mind at work. But directly across the street from me was a very good friend, Troy Anthony Hall. This guy, out of all the guys on our block, and there were quite a bit of them, shout out to James and Jimmy Montgomery, who was on our same block, but they lived on past 90th Avenue. Very passionate brothers. Out of all of these guys, and all of them were amazingly passionate, no one was quite as passionate as Troy and I believe me. Troy and I hung out. That was my brother from another mother. You know what I mean? And Troy, I mean, he lived across the street. We was teenagers, we was kids. You know what I mean? So what else is there to do with two guys growing up in the golden age of hip hop? Golden era of hip hop. He's got Run DMC posters on his wall. He's got LL Cool J posted on his wall. Bigger, badder, deffer, all of that stuff. He's got every flavor colored Kango you could imagine. He's got the Izod shirts, the BVDs. I mean, this is the day. This is the mid to late 80s. This is the time. All Troy wants to do is rap. So, of course, we had ciphers pretty much every freaking day, especially in the summertime, and we would just rap against each other. We were battling all the freaking time. Even when I moved away from Hollis, Queens and moved to Southside, Queens, Troy would call me. Hey, let's freaking battle. My man Dolphus Jr., God bless his soul, he would listen to the phone while me and Troy would battle freaking all night. Freestyle here, freestyle here. Troy had a very intricate style. He was ahead of his time way back then. And he helped me sharpen my sword. All I did was freaking rap. That's all I really do now is write words, play with words, perform words, and etc. You know what I mean? So we were two peas in a pod, all right? I moved from the block, and Troy's relentless nature, as the story goes, I wasn't there, but word around the campfire is the rumor mill about, I don't know what really happened. I know the Source magazine kind of covered it. The news kind of freaking covered it. But this is what from the guys I know in that circle, I'm still in New York at the time, but this is what happened. Apparently, Troy is now moved out of Hollis, Queens. He moves out of Hollis, Queens, and he finds himself in a group home in Manhattan. Isn't a strange freaking thing? I know him and his mother were a little estranged. His mother divorced. His biological father had a stepfather who used to abuse him, and his mother, from what he would tell me, he would be mad at his mom because his mother would take the side of the stepfather when it came to him abusing him. So, needless to say, Troy was very angry. I left home when I was about 16, 17 years old. Troy was not too freaking far behind me. I stayed with some other family. For those of us who aren't fortunate enough to have, resources, family, or whatever, he found himself in a group home in Manhattan. Word around the campfire is that one day he gets off of, I think, the subway, and he sees Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest. Okay. He sees an opportunity here. He just goes up to Q-Tip. I believe Q-Tip is on an interview on YouTube verifying this. And Q-Tip comes out of the train station, I believe the story goes, and Troy just starts rapping to this guy. Troy just starts rapping to Q-Tip. Now, I'm pretty sure Q-Tip if he's not inducted into the Hip Hop Hall of Fame as of yet, I'm pretty sure A Tribe Called Quest, the rap group, at some point will be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They are that iconic and that significant in the genre of rock and roll hip hop. Hip hop is just basically rock and roll for the black people. Well, Most Def. That's a Most Def quote. So he just starts rapping to Q-Tip. Q-Tip is so blown away, A, by his skill level, and B, just by the sheer audacity that this kid came out of nowhere and just started freaking rapping, that he had to get to know him. This getting to know him led him to inviting Hood, and I believe he was performing at this point. This is the early 90s now. This is a Tribe Called Quest's third album, A Low End Theory. And they want him to rap on a very popular song called The Scenario. They was going to do a remix. They did a remix to The Scenario, and they invited Troy to get on the song. Now, back in the mid-'80s, for all of you cats that don't know, the album name he had credited on the album was was Kid Hood. Okay. I know his name we called him Hood back on the block, but Hood was short for his 80s name, which was Hood Starosky. Everybody in the 80s in New York who was a graffiti artist, hip hop guy, dancer, break dancer, whatever, DJ, probably had D or Ski or Chill, something like that, somewhere incorporated at the end of their name. There was a whole bunch of fucking, Joe Ski Love, freaking, what's my man? What's the frick is his name? Curtis Blow. Anyway, his original name was Hood Starosky. I'm the Hood Starosky. Okay, of course. Here come the 90s. You can't call yourself Ski anymore. Ski was a play on all of the cocaine that was being done. Ski, as in to ski on snow. It was a luxury drug back in the day. So if you were associated with cocaine, i.e. Curtis Blow, it made you cool. You know what I mean? This is before the crack epidemic. It's before the crack era, before crack babies and all of that stuff, where cocaine was kind of wasn't so glamorous anymore. But back then, cocaine was glamorous. So his name was Hood Starosky, and he shortened it. Everybody just basically called him Hood. A few people called him Troy, but he just preferred to be called Hood. But I was happy for him. He would call me all the time. And he called me. He wanted to surprise me. So he calls me and was just like, I'm about to blow. You know what I mean? It's on. I got something for you. Our relationship since we was kids was just freaking battling on the phone. It was all friendly competition, by the way. You know what I mean? Win, lose, or draw, and we've battled many times. I never felt a way if he got the better of me in a battle, and he never felt a way if I one-upped him in a battle, right? You know what I mean? I would, whatever, So I knew something was up because he's always freaking excited, but I knew something was extra going on. And until I got the news that Hood was dead. Apparently, I don't know what happened. He was hollering at some girl. As the legend goes, he was hollering at some girl, and she had a man, I guess, and they get to arguing outside. There's a fight that ensues, and somewhere in the midst of this fight, my man Troy Anthony Hall, aka Hood or Kid Hood or Hood Starosky, whatever you choose to say, he gets shot in his eye. Days after he recorded the Scenario remix with a Tribe Called Quest and Leaders of the New School. This is a huge opportunity that he was about to freaking blow out of the water. He was rapping on a remix of one of a Tribe Called Quest's biggest records, number one. The members of a Tribe Called Quest, Phife Dawg, rest in peace, Phife Dawg, and Q-Tip, you know what I mean? And Allah Shahi Muhammad, I believe the DJ's name is. This is a legendary freaking group, okay? And on this record, they had another group called A Leaders of the New School, which the members were Charlie Brown, Dinko D, and a very young very impactful, Busta Rhymes. Busta Rhymes and Q-Tip are still amazingly relevant to this day, and they're making crazy music to this day. So Troy is rapping on this. I hear the remix, and the remix is freaking dope, and Troy goes first. And he is a lyrical assassin on this particular track. And I'm happy for him that he made it before he died, but the story itself is amazingly tragic. Troy was one of those guys that would have truly been I had the nothing and now I have something. He would have truly been the rags to riches story. You know what I mean? Kid started out with not a whole lot, grew up on the block with us, super hungry, super passionate. Everybody used to try to dismiss him and everything because all he did was rap. You know how it is. Y'all know how it is when you're passionate about your craft and everybody just kind of blowing you off. He's got a very stressful living situation where he has an abusive stepfather, looks for comfort, some type of escape from his mother. His mother is just taking the side of the freaking stepfather. He decides to freaking leave home. He'd rather stay in a group home than to be living at freaking home in the midst of this freaking abuse. Meets a Tribe Called Quest, calls me somewhere in the midst of this. Like, dude, this is about to be, it's going down. You that freaking close, and then someone takes your life just like that. Tragic indeed. What is the moral of this story? Let me think about that for a second. I'm not trying to hold you too long. This is the kidhood story. But before we do that, since this is an episode of The Adventures of a Naive Poet, I really want to highlight a naive notion that I had. And my naive notion was that there is a possibility that if you work really hard, you could work as hard as you could possibly work and not necessarily be a success. I no longer believe that is true because it's not true. My naivete felt like you could do all of this and get nothing from it. But it really depends on how you look at success. It really depends on your definition of success. Take me, for example. In those days, I could have made a lot of choices that I didn't make, and that cost me many a record deal back in the freaking 90s and even in the early freaking 2000s. You know what I mean? A lot of these companies want you to rap about girls you don't date, rap about thug activity you don't do, and rap about money you don't have and cars you don't drive. And my answer, my rebuttal would just be like, well, I actually live in the hood and I'm not a tough guy. So if I start rapping like a tough guy, when I go back to the hood, I'm going to, the real hood guys are going to test me, and it's hard enough. It's hard enough. And they know me and I'm cool with the guys, and it's hard enough getting home safely every freaking day. So I'm certainly not going to bring that kind of energy, attention to myself. But what really is success? Do you have to be a gold or platinum artist to be successful? If the goal is just to be the baddest wordsmith, MC, poet, spoken word author, whatever it is, if your goal is just to be the baddest person, woman or man, doing what you do, and you hone your craft every day and you are the best version of yourself, are you not a success? Do you need corporate who doesn't fucking know anything anyway? Do you really need corporate to sell you a bag of goods? Do you need corporate?